lone blue glove on her left hand and knee-high black boots. "Penny for your thoughts, mister?" she asked with a good-natured smile on her face. Ash gave a small smile himself and then sighed. "I guess I'm just nervous is all." Soledad sat next to him and nodded. "About the match you mean?" The boy shook his head and clasped his hands together. "No, it's just, I'm not nervous about the battle itself. I mean rather we win or lose doesn't matter because to me it's about growing stronger and getting closer to my Pokémon. It's more of me being afraid that I won't be able to fully do right by my Pokémon." Soledad appeared slightly confused. "How so?" Reaching out, Ash grabbed one of the 2 Pokeballs on the table in front of him and held it in his hands while looking down at it. "My Pokémon deserve the best. They're great and they always will be. I'm just a rookie and sometimes I'm afraid that I won't lead them right in battle and make mistakes that either get them hurt or humiliates them. And that's just a scary thought." Soledad remained silent for several moments before finally responding, "Yeah, that makes sense. I can totally understand how you feel. To be honest, I felt the same way about my Pokémon back when I first began competing in contests. Actually, I still do." Ash looked at her in surprise. "Really? You do?" The redhead nodded. "Sure. It's only natural for a compassionate, caring trainer to worry that they aren't good enough for their Pokémon, just the same as I'm sure all Pokémon in that same situation feel about themselves. But you know what I've learned about all that though?" Getting nothing more from Ash than a look which implored her to continue, she did so. "I've learned in situations like that to not worry about it. As long as you give it your all and treat your Pokémon as best as you can, you are more than worthy of being their trainer just as they are being your Pokémon." Ash looked thoughtful for a few moments before smiling and nodding to her. Yeah, you know you're right, Soledad. Thanks. I guess I needed to hear something like that because it can all get a little much sometimes, you know." The older girl chuckled. "You don't gotta tell me, I know it well enough to write a small book about it." They both laughed at that as Brock and the others came downstairs looking dressed and ready for the day. "Who's ready for breakfast?" Brock asked with a smile as they approached. "I was thinking that we could all have a nice meal together before we head out for Ash's gym battle." Ash patted his stomach and grinned before shrugging and replying, "Well, I already ate, but you know, I think I could eat again." Yet another laugh was roused, this time by everyone, before the group of 5, plus Pikachu, went out to the outdoor picnic area where Brock commenced to cooking up a hearty breakfast onto the small table-side grill. The tension of an upcoming fierce gym battle being temporarily forgotten over the mouth-watering smell of Brock's cooking beginning to sizzle. Almost an hour and a half later, when breakfast was officially finished, Ash and his friends could be seen standing before the large Saffron City Pokémon gym that stretched before them like a daunting gauntlet ready to chew up its contestants and spit them out alive. A building in which was a vast contrast from the park-like, wooded area it was situated in amongst the heart of the city and was only a short distance away from where Giselle and Misty had their battle against the rich girls 2 days prior. Looking up at the gym and then at Pikachu, the two of them shared a simple nod before stepping forward and entering the gym with the others right behind them. Upon entering, they found the inside of the gym to look very different from its somewhat strangely built outside appearance. There was essentially a long hallway that stretched widely on all sides, running down the whole length of the gym, with several other hallways off to the sides from the main one and a set of large double doors at the very end of it. The interior design and decor of the gym was rather plain and everything seemed to be colored a mixed shade of dull yellow, orange and possibly even brown in places. On the right side of the entrance to the gym was a row of doors that lead to who knows where, and to the left was a single door which showed an interesting spectacle on the other side of the glass window built into its top surface. Walking closer to the door, Ash and his friends looked in and saw several people in white coats with face masks on performing a variety of odd and very unusual things. Some people were holding up cards to each other while sitting down around one of the many tables in the room, while the person they were holding said cards up for would stare hard at the back of it, almost as though they were attempting to see through it. Even still, other people were doing things just as weird, like staring at random blocks spread out on tables, holding their hands out to large piles of miscellaneous objects, doing the same thing but only to each other, standing still blindfolded while someone else struck close to them with thick sticks, sitting down meditating at random places, and also, the strangest by far, a few people were even sitting or standing around while staring at one another unblinkingly. The 5 travelers standing outside of the room could only watch in total confusion and bafflement as the unusual individuals beyond the glass did, whatever it was they were doing. Eventually, however, Misty spoke up with a quirked eyebrow, saying what everyone was thinking but not quite able enough to put into words. Okay. I don't know what the people in that room have, but it's obvious by what they're doing and those medical masks on their faces that it's contagious and probably affects their brain, so I suggest we go now before we catch whatever freaky virus that's making them act like complete weirdos. They are not weirdos. A loud, angry, accented voice shouted from behind them. Something which made the 4 trainers and 1 coordinator spin around in fright to see a man with long, messy brown hair that was tied back, whom was also wearing similar attire as the ones beyond the glass door, now standing behind them with his right hand pointed out accusingly. Finding his voice first, Ash asked cautiously, what was that, mister? The med mask-covered man marched up to them and pointed into the room beyond. Those people are not sick. They are trying to unlock their psychic abilities, you fools. All 5 faces dropped immediately into ones of disbelief, surprise, shock and also skepticism as soon as those words left the man's mouth. Psychic abilities, sir. Giselle spoke up hesitantly from beside of Ash. The man nodded vigorously. Yes, you heard me, little girl. Psychic abilities. We work tirelessly every day in that room to hopefully someday awaken our psychic powers so that we can become like the great Sabrina. Sabrina's a psychic? Giselle questioned Elle again. As in like, telepathy and mind reading and all that stuff. Soledad giggled behind her hand just as the man went to answer Giselle, causing him to round his crazed, fierce gaze onto her. You do not believe me, girl. You wish to laugh and make mockery of the great Sabrina and our birthright. Soledad held her hands up and immediately began shaking her head while saying apologetically, No sir, no, I just thought it was funny that. The man cut her off. What did you think was funny? Seeing us wearing these outfits or maybe struggling to do something you say is impossible, Well, I will show you impossible. Standing back, the man reached into his coat quickly, causing Ash and the others to take defensive positions in case the obviously volatile stranger did something crazy. However, when he instead whipped out a regular old dinner spoon and held it up into the air like it was the solution to all of life's problems, they went from nervous to completely baffled. Now seriously questioning the man's sanity as he held the spoon up with both hands in front of him and laughed manically. Ahahahaha. Now behold, the true might and power of telekinesis in all its glory. His mask-covered face scrunching up into one of intense concentration, the man started to make grunting noises as every vein in his forehead and neck started to pop and his eyes began to strain. The girls shared concerned looks among themselves as Brock stepped forward and asked hesitantly, Sir, however, he was immediately interrupted as the man shouted, Don't speak. Causing Brock to fall silent and step back again. Finally, after several long, boring moments, the spoon in his hand gradually, shifted just a very tiny bit. Seeing this, the man cheered in triumph and lunged back while pointing at the spoon. Aha! See that? I did it. Giselle blinked widely. Did what exactly, sir? The man scoffed. You didn't see it. Stupid girl, I bent the spoon with my mind. Ash however squinted his eyes at the spoon and put a hand to his chin before quirking an eyebrow and saying with almost humorous dismissiveness, Meh. I don't see it. Still looks the same to me. The masked man blinked octolishly before pointing at the spoon again and all but jabbing it into Ash's face. What do you mean you can't see it? It's right there, clear as day. See. He pointed closely at the spoon, which, upon closer inspection, might have been slightly more rounded than before. There. Now can you not see my psychic prowess shining through? Ash just crossed his arms and looked away while smirking as he simply shrugged and replied offhandedly, Nope, still don't see anything. Must have been the wind or something. The man appeared to be on the verge of having an aneurysm as he growled and shoved the spoon at Ash. Fine. You try and bend the spoon with your mind then, you disbelieving little brat. Instead of taking the spoon, however, Ash just looked at it and then pushed the man's hand away from his face. I tell you what, why don't you instead just take me to Sabrina so I can battle her and see what real psychic powers are all about, since she supposedly is the real deal. Nothing you do will convince me because let's face it, that outfit makes you look like a total freak. And you want me to take you seriously in it? Yeah, that'll happen. The man was red in the face with rage as he gestured at himself and replied vehemently, "I will have you know that this outfit we wear helps keep negative outside forces from messing with our pure psychic energy. The area we practice in must be free entirely of infection and bacteria, or otherwise it could taint our cerebral focus and inner power." Calming himself slightly, he rubbed the bridge of his nose and then spoke in a more contained voice. "But, if you insist on challenging the great Sabrina, then I will take you to meet your fate." He then turned around and gestured behind him. "Follow me." With no further ado, Ash and the others followed the man to the end of the long, wide hallway which was illuminated by torches on the walls, where the aforementioned set of large double doors was waiting at the end. Pushing them open, the man stepped inside and allowed Ash and his friends to come in. As they did, the five of them took in the appearance of the inner gym and noted that it greatly resembled a large chamber. Multiple pillars resided on either side of the room that connected the floor and ceiling above, and the battlefield itself rested directly in the center of the chamber. A square ring on the ceiling that stretched all around the room also had a row of several lights on it which gave the gym a faint, dusky glow of illumination. At the very front of the room a platform rested against the wall with steps leading up to it and two flaming pedestals on either side of said platform. In the middle of it, a throne-like chair was situated in the blackness that was cast by the back wall, and sitting in the chair was a figure shrouded in shadow. Nothing at all visible from the individual but their faint silhouette, of which somehow gave them far more than just an eerie, creepy persona. Just as they stepped closer to the arena in the center of the gym, a cold, emotionless female voice spoke up from the throne-like chair. "Why have you chosen to disturb me this time? I sincerely hope for your sake that there is a good reason." The man appeared visibly nervous but pointed to Ash as he spoke in a respectful and docile tone, "Great Sabrina. This ingrate has come seeking to challenge you and will not take any less than yes for an answer." The voice remained silent for several moments before finally replying with a simple, "Very well." At that point, the lights came on in the gym at full power and a black-haired girl with bangs over her forehead who appeared to be in her late teens was shown to be sitting on the throne. She was wearing a red and black button-up long skirt of some kind with yellow buttons on its center that hugged her body and came down to her upper thigh, along with black thigh-high boots on her legs. What was even more surprising and confusing about the woman though was the small child sitting upon her lap holding a ball. The little girl was dressed in an old-timey white dress with pink frills here and there and a similar colored wide-brimmed hat upon her head. Her eyes were not visible under the brim. Sabrina's voice spoke again, "So, you wish to challenge me?" Which was really more of a statement than a question and was directed straight at Ash. The boy in question nodded and stepped forward. "Yes, I do. A battle for the Saffron Gym badge. My name is Ash Ketchum from Pallet Town." A voice did indeed reply to him, though it was not Sabrina's and sounded very childlike. A voice in which, surprisingly enough, came from the little girl on her lap. "Oh yay, a fun Pokémon battle. We accept. Only on one condition though." Ash blinked a few times before asking, "And that would be?" The girl giggled before answering, "If you lose, you and your friends have to play with me and be my friends forever." That made Ash's friends share a confused, though also slightly worried look amongst themselves while Ash narrowed his eyes and remained thoughtful, having no idea what she was talking about and figuring it to be mere child's talk. Finally though, he nodded. "Fine. If I lose then I will become your friend and play with you, forever. However, I refuse to count my friends in on this because I don't speak for them. So take me instead if I lose but not them." "Agreed." The little girl giggled again. "Okay." The man wearing the face mask stepped out to the edge of the ring while Ash took his place in his trainer's box. The doors behind them suddenly shut tightly, causing everyone but Ash, the man and Sabrina to whip around in fright just as Sabrina herself actually floated up into the air and landed in her own box. This made the eyes of Ash's friends all but pop out in astonishment while said raven-haired trainer went a little wide-eyed himself and breathed out slowly. "Okay. I guess she really is the real deal. This should be fun." When they were in position, the man wearing the medical mask spoke up loudly enough for all to hear, "This is a match between Sabrina of the Saffron City Gym and Ash Ketchum of Pallet Town. This will be a 3-on-3 battle and whoever loses all of their Pokémon first will be defeated, only the challenger may substitute Pokémon. Please choose your first Pokémon." Suddenly, the ball in the little girl's hands morphed into a Pokeball which floated out into the arena as Sabrina announced emotionlessly, "Abra. I choose you." Out of the Pokeball came the small, squinty-eyed psychic Pokémon which took a simple sitting position near the middle of the ring while chanting a slow, stoic, "Abra. Abra. Abra," over and over again. Taking in the sight of the very troublesome and not to be underestimated psychic type, Ash looked down at Pikachu and nodded. "You're up, buddy. I know you can do this." Pikachu nodded himself and ran out onto the field, taking a battle-ready crouch position but not acting overly aggressive due to the intense focus and concentration upon his face. His eyes staring hard at the seemingly unimposing Pokémon before him with a calculative, unwavering gaze as he knew from what his trainer told him before about just how frustrating and difficult battling an opponent like Abra could be. Back with his friends, Soledad crossed her arms and spoke with an air of strong curiosity in her voice. "Interesting choice of type match-up to use against a psychic Pokémon," she stated idly. "Given how knowledgeable Ash seems to be about Pokémon, I would have half expected him to use something else like maybe a ghost type since they are strong against psychic ones. I know you traveled through Lavender Town and he has at least one now from the story you told me, so to not use it here seems not to make much sense to me. Abra is a notoriously difficult Pokémon to battle even with a type advantage, not having that seems almost nonsensical." Brock shook his head and smiled. "Trust me Soli, you don't know Ash. That kid thinks of a lot of things before and even during a battle, so I can guarantee he's already thought of this and probably developed a strategy around it. It's just not like him to go aimlessly into a battle without taking into consideration different possibilities." Giselle nodded and spoke up from beside of Misty. "Brock's right, Soledad and Ash already told me what he planned on doing this morning when we were all training together. He was running the 3 Pokémon he planned on using for this battle through different scenarios and told them all they needed to know about what to expect when battling most common psychic types." She looked out at her boyfriend and continued, "He said that it would make most sense to use nothing but ghost types, yes, but at the same time, he knew it would also be the most expected. If Sabrina is as talented and skilled as we've heard, then she's probably trained to learn how to handle most situations involving a ghost Pokémon, so the playing field is more even. He wanted to use a strategy that was unorthodox to maybe help throw her off a little bit." Soledad shrugged and smiled slightly. "Well, he's definitely proven to be unique up to this point, so I don't see why I can't trust him." Back on the battlefield, Sabrina stated in her emotionless voice as soon as she saw Pikachu, an electric type. "How foolish. This will be over quickly." Instead of replying, Ash just pointed at Abra and commanded Pikachu, "Use Quick Attack Pikachu." His body glowing faintly white, Pikachu rocketed off from where he was standing and shot straight at Abra. However, just before he could make contact, the psychic Pokémon warped away into thin air and reappeared on another end of the ring. Pikachu didn't let that stop him though and turned flawlessly on his front paws and put himself on yet another collision course with Abra in mere seconds. The small psychic type disappeared once more, but Pikachu was utterly relentless, chasing down Abra again and again, all while showing no signs of fatigue whatsoever. The child in Sabrina's lap giggled and taunted playfully, "You should know by now that it isn't working, why would you keep doing it? I hope future friend isn't a dummy, because that won't be any fun at all." Instead of replying to the child's taunting, Ash called out again. Pikachu used Double Team and Agility. The powerful little electric type took off at Abra again, but this time as he did so, several clones of himself phased into existence around him and began to surround Abra while running at top speed. However, just as the little girl in Sabrina's lap giggled again and was about to say something, Ash beat her to it with a smile while initiating the next part of his strategy. Pikachu used Thunderbolt near to, but don't hit Abra. The several copies of Pikachu all discharged a stream of powerful electric voltage straight at the psychic type, but instead of hitting it, they instead fell short and began impacting the ground around Abra in a circle-like formation. Giggling once more, the little girl spoke in what seemed like a mocking tone. "Your Pikachu must be broken, that attack didn't get anywhere near Abra." Ash simply smirked. "It doesn't have to, look." Sure enough, even though the lightning bolts didn't hit Abra, the sheer number of them did manage to accomplish something. That being a simple play on an anatomical fact and even flaw about Abra that most people would usually forget or altogether not think about. Even though Abra was an exceedingly intelligent and gifted Pokémon in the area of psychic manipulation, a few of its natural senses were greatly underdeveloped due to its heavy reliance on nothing but its mental powers. Such as its sight, for instance. Due to this, Abra's other senses were forced to undergo dramatic enhancements in order to make up for its lack of normal sight. One of these compensational senses being its hearing. It was a well-known fact amongst professionals that Abra had very sensitive hearing, and because of this, sounds that would normally not overly bother individuals with average hearing would be almost like pure torture and agonizing pain for Abra. Given all of the incredibly loud thunderbolts now mere feet away from Abra and keeping it boxed in, the psychic type was being subjected to all of the ear-blastingly loud decibels that the lightning-based attacks were producing. A tactic which proved to be working as Abra clamped its hands over its ears in a rare show of bodily movement, and its face actually scrunched up into one of pain. Its concentration now broken, which meant that it couldn't use its cerebral abilities, Ash took immediate advantage of the situation and yelled out, "Pikachu, use Thunderbolt on Abra now." Charging his body up, Pikachu reared back and cried, "Pikachu!" As a bolt of pure electrical energy came hurtling from his body and impacted against the psychic type with little fanfare. As it was being electrocuted, all Abra could do was cry out its name in pain before the bolt finally exploded, shooting a cloud of smoke up into the air while Ash's friends watched on in amazement. However, when the cloud of black smoke finally passed and revealed a badly burnt Abra laying on the ground, things did not happen the way in which Ash or anyone else was expecting. In fact, just the exact opposite ended up proving itself to be true as, instead of passing out, Abra began to glow a bright white, almost silver color. Knowing exactly what was happening even as their opponent began to change shape, Ash dropped his shoulders and sighed. Well, this really sucks. In mere moments, the evolution that had awakened itself in Abra faded away and left a much bigger, fully bipedal Pokémon in its wake. A Pokémon now holding spoons in its hands with a strange star-like marking in the middle of its forehead. A Pokémon which spoke its name seconds later, showing it to be completely rejuvenated from its earlier toasting as an Abra. Kadabra. The newly evolved Pokémon chanted while holding its spoons up, causing the little girl to giggle and speak again. "Wow, thanks for helping Abra to evolve. That was so nice of you." Misty cringed and hid her face behind her hands. "Ooh, this is gonna be bad. Ash is really gonna have to pull something crazy out here," Brock surmised evenly of the situation while Giselle sighed. "It just can't ever be easy, can it? I mean, come on." Soledad, however, remained silent, simply watching the events play out and eyes trained on Ash, whom still seemed collected and calm despite the turn of fortune. Unfortunately, before he or Pikachu could make a move, Sabrina beat them to it. Ordering simply in her cold tone, Kadabra used confusion. Before Ash could have Pikachu move out of the way, Kadabra's eyes and the spoons in its hands suddenly began glowing blue as Pikachu's entire body locked up and went stiff as a board. Pikachu grunted as he struggled to move his body, but to no avail. The powerful psychic type attack had him completely slaved to its will with no chance of controlling his own body. Then, just as Ash started trying to think of a way to help free Pikachu of the invisible force now constricting him, Kadabra moved its eyes to the right. When it did, Pikachu was flung across the gym and slammed into the far wall. Another grunt of "Pika" getting expelled from the electric type's mouth as the wind was forcibly knocked out of his lungs and his body was rocked from the sheer force of the impact. Unfortunately, this became an immediate trend that Kadabra was rather fond of as it stood in one place and simply shifted its eyes this way and that. Pikachu following said gaze unwillingly as he flew all across the gym and got smashed up against the walls, floor and ceiling. At one point, while Pikachu was getting trounced up and down on the ceiling and floor like a rag doll, Ash yelled for him to try and use Thunderbolt but was beat to it by Sabrina, whom commanded a simple, Kadabra use Disable. As those words left her lips, Kadabra's eyes and body glowed an even brighter blue. As this happened, Pikachu's attempt at creating a Thunderbolt ended instantly. A look of confusion upon his face that made it appear as though he could no longer remember how to use the powerful electric attack. "This is bad," Brock observed. "Disable makes a Pokémon completely forget a certain move for a varying period of time. Ash needs to find a way to get Pikachu out of this fast." At that same time, Kadabra dropped Pikachu to the ground, whom landed with a heavy thud. However, Just as the hardy little Pokémon slowly began struggling to get up, Sabrina's cold voice spoke again in order to continue the onslaught. Kadabra, use Confuse Ray. Kadabra's eyes and body glowed once more, this time purple, and as they did, rings of wavy energy came from the spoons in Kadabra's hands and washed themselves down upon Pikachu, whose eyes became distant and unfocused as his mental facilities went into temporary La-La Land. As though he were being controlled by an external force again, Pikachu began slamming his head into the ground repeatedly as well as thrashing around and running in circles with no control over his actions whatsoever. Oh man, this is bad. Misty fretted while wringing her hands together tightly. Come on Pikachu, you can do this. Don't stop fighting, Giselle yelled with her hands over her mouth. To make matters worse, Kadabra added insult to injury by picking Pikachu up with confusion again on Sabrina's command and then slamming him into the ground repeatedly once more. Ash, you need to stop this match or Pikachu's gonna get hurt. Soledad finally shouted from the sidelines as true worry for the suffering electric type began to fill her heart. Ash however didn't respond with an audible reply. His eyes were locked onto the battle and all of his concentration was centered around Pikachu. Even as the little girl in Sabrina's lap spoke up again in an obviously mocking voice, you really are a bad Pokémon trainer, aren't you? What kind of person would keep making their Pokémon suffer like this when they know they can't win? Ooh, you really are bad. Bad, bad, bad. Ash was determined not to let the taunting words get to him, even as he watched Pikachu get repeatedly thrashed on the ground. I know Pikachu is strong, he can take way more than this. Please just hold on buddy, I'm thinking of a way to get us out of this. When Kadabra finally ended the vicious beating by tossing Pikachu up to the ceiling, which he hit and then fell back to the ground like a heavy stone, the electric type impacted the ground with a thud and lay still with marks and bruises all over his body. The little girl's taunting voice was now giggling at Pikachu's misfortune. Hey, your Pikachu is all done playing. That's so sad, I wanted to play with it more. However, as Ash watched Pikachu struggle upon the ground, he somehow knew that his Pokémon wasn't done yet. He knew Pikachu had a little bit left to give and he wasn't about to let that go to waste. Suddenly, in that same moment, it struck Ash like a ton of brick breaks exactly what could be done to possibly turn the tide in the battle. Looking at Kadabra, he realized the powerful psychic type's one true weakness as he gazed upon its head. A weakness in which he hoped could be exploited to possible victory. The idea now formed in his brain, Ash decided to wing it and see if his plan would work. Pikachu, build up all of your electrical energy and then release it in a burst with Thundershock. Hearing his trainer's words and being determined to give it his all until he collapsed, Pikachu grunted with tremendous effort and slowly stood up. His body sparking brightly, the high-voltage Pokémon began growling its name lowly with one eye closed. Pee-Caw, Pee-Caw. With each passing second, Pikachu's body glowed brighter and brighter as an electrical shield of energy formed around him and began sparking all across the ground around him. P-K-A-A-A-A-A. Pikaw. With his energy at the maximum level for his beaten and exhausted state, Pikachu released all the pent-up electrical charge inside his body. However, instead of releasing it in a concentrated burst like he normally would to attack an opponent, the static energy was set off very similar to a bomb exploding. Meaning basically that all of his built-up electrical power erupted outward in a bright flash of blinding light which made Ash's friends and even he himself cover their eyes due to the sheer brightness that suddenly illuminated the dreary gym. Unfortunately for Kadabra, it wasn't prepared for the sudden solar flare-like blast of bright light, causing the eyes of the bipedal psychic type to take the full brunt of the bright explosion as they immediately contracted and dilated in size, becoming several times wider than their normal width as Kadabra slapped its hands over its eyes and stumbled back from the numbing pain now stinging its vision. Seeing his plan had worked, Ash yelled quickly, "Now Pikachu, jump onto Kadabra's head and use Thunder Wave." Even in his tired, battered state, Pikachu still moved as fast as he could on his trainer's command and was on his feet and in the air in mere seconds, landing upon Kadabra's head even as his cheeks sparked. With a loud chew, Pikachu released a wave of arcing electricity which bathed Kadabra's entire body in a field of yellow, almost golden energy. As the paralysis-causing electrical attack pulsed throughout Kadabra's body like a sense-dulling, muscle-freezing suit of pure electric energy, its arms shot out to the side and eyes flew wide open. What was more, the focal point of the electrical power was centered where Pikachu was at, which was upon Kadabra's head. Essentially, this meant that Kadabra's brain was getting zapped and overloaded with relentless volts of electricity which caused what could only be described as a fog of thick, mind-numbing confusion and lightheadedness to descend upon the psychic type. This also unfortunately meant for Kadabra that since its brain was temporarily frazzled from the electrical discharge it had endured, any and all psychic-based abilities were now locked out to it for the time being. Quite obviously, this was a remarkable advantage for Ash and Pikachu, which they took instant advantage of. "Alright Pikachu, now jump away and use thunder," Ash yelled from his trainer's box. Jumping off and away from Kadabra, Pikachu landed on the ground near the middle of the ring and built up one final charge of immense electrical energy. Pika. As he collected more and more of his electric power, not only did Pikachu's body spark madly but the entire gym began to glow with a faint yellow, almost bluish aura. An actual storm cloud of buzzing, whirring electric energy now forming above Kadabra's head and sending sparks of electricity all throughout the gym. Finally, with a final cry of, "Pikachu!" the storm cloud above Kadabra opened up like the actual clouds outside of the gym and released their detrimental payload unto the Pokémon below. All Kadabra could do was look up with actual fear showing upon its usually emotionless face as a bolt of massive lightning crashed down from the storm cloud and struck it with all of the ferocity of an actual lightning storm. The psychic type's body was entirely lost in the glow of the pillar of electrical energy now consuming it as it cried out in pain and became ramrod straight like someone had strapped a wood plank to its back. Ash, Pikachu, Soledad, the others and even the ring referee looked on with bated breath while Kadabra endured the brutal electrocution of a lifetime before finally, it all came to a head and the bolt of lightning exploded with a mighty roar. The entire gym becoming awash with a thick cloud of smoke. Ash and everyone else had to cover their eyes and mouth, coughing while the black haze very slowly faded away. The after effects of such a powerful blast of lightning still being felt in the form of small charges of static energy which buzzed around the gym and made the hair on everyone's arms and even head stand on end. When everything became visible once again, a sizable crater was left in the ring where the bolt of lightning struck and Kadabra itself was seen still standing up in the middle of said hole in the exact same position it had been in moments before. Its entire body covered in black scorch marks and its eyes gazing distantly up at the ceiling above as Pikachu moved his tired body into a ready position in case Kadabra wasn't down for the count yet. This however proved not to be the case when, just seconds later, the psychic Pokémon collapsed fully to the ground on its back with a poof of smoke leaving its mouth. Its eyes now nothing but swirls as the spoons it religiously held actually fell from its hands and rolled to the sides. Feeling complete and total shock that Sabrina's Abra, now Kadabra, had actually been defeated for the first time that he could remember, the man with the medical mask over his face took several moments to overcome his stunned surprise at the completely unexpected turn of events. When he finally did though, the man raised a shaky hand and announced, "Kadabra is unable to battle, Pikachu is the winner." Hearing those words spoken, Ash ran out onto the field and scooped the battered Pikachu into his arms while spinning him around in circles. "Pikachu, you did it. I knew you could, you're stronger and tougher than anyone gives you credit for. Man, I'm so proud of you." Even though his entire body quite literally ached to the bone from getting intimately familiar with practically every square inch of the gym in the most painful way possible, Pikachu smiled at his trainer's praise and held his hands up while cheering. "Pikachu pie." While Giselle and Misty cheered and Brock breathed a heavy sigh of temporary relief, Soledad smiled and crossed her arms while watching the touching interaction between trainer and Pokémon. "Huh, that kid really does surprise at every turn. I'll admit that I'm impressed. I just hope he can keep it up because this match isn't over yet." Sereno, possibly due to her emotionless personality or maybe even lack of compassion for her Pokémon, Sabrina made no outward shows of emotion of any kind and simply said, "Kadabra return," as the down psychic type returned to the Pokéball that was still in the little girl's grasp on Sabrina's lap. Moments later, the Pokéball disappeared and a new one appeared in the little girl's hands which Sabrina released with a cold announcement of, "Grumpig go." Out of the red and white capture device came a flash of light and sparkles that quickly took shape into the figure of a black and purple bipedal Pokémon with black pearls on its head and also one right near the center of its stomach. Along with that, it also had a long, very curly tail that stretched out behind it. "Pig." Sabrina's second Pokémon called out as it flexed its arms to the sky. Ash took in the sight of his next opponent, and in the few moments it took for him to register Sabrina's new Pokémon and walk back over to his side of the ring, he already knew everything he needed to know about it without pulling out his Pokédex. A trend that wasn't really that uncommon, all things considered, since Professor Oak's 5 years' worth of instructions and strict lessons on all the many different species of Pokémon there were in the world had stuck in Ash's photographic memory like an octillery to a Wailord's hind end. Placing Pikachu down on the ground to rest, Ash straightened up and looked Grumpig over with a narrowed gaze. Grumpig is a psychic type, but unlike Kadabra, it also possesses actual physical strengths that other psychic Pokémon usually don't have. Its legs and arms are pretty powerful, which allows it to learn fighting-type moves, and the tail on its backside lets it catapult high into the air. Meaning bounce and maybe even body slam could be a problem combined with the psychic-type abilities it can use. Making his decision, Ash selected his Pokémon and then threw its Pokéball out into the air. "Alright, Charmander, let's go." As the powerful little fire-type Pokémon materialized onto the battlefield with a cry of its name, the girl in Sabrina's lap giggled for seemingly the dozenth time. "Isn't it cute? We look forward to playing with it once you lose." Ash wouldn't hear her taunts and let it throw him off of his game though, as he immediately started the battle off with a high note and shouted, "Charmander, use flamethrower." Balling his fists up as fire appeared at the edges of his mouth, Charmander opened his maw and shouted his name again while releasing a stream of glowing hot flames at Grumpig. Sabrina's voice could be heard seconds later though as she countered with, "Use Psychic now, Grumpig." As she said that, the little black balls on Grumpig's body glowed blue, followed by everything else. At the same time, the cone of flames heading towards it stopped in midair, just inches in front of Grumpig, with a faint blue glowing outline around it as well, and then shot straight up to the ceiling when the psychic type directed its focus upwards. Sabrina's voice echoed throughout the large chamber room again as she commanded immediately after that, "Now use Psybeam." Grumpig's eyes glowed in a scale of multicolors quickly before twin beams of psychic energy shot from its eyes and headed straight for Charmander. Ash saw this and was quick to take evasive action, dodge to the side Charmander and use Fire Spin. Leaping away just as the beams of energy exploded on contact with where Charmander had just been standing moments before, the little fire type rolled a few times and then stopped in a crouched position as he opened his mouth and expelled a twisting funnel of flames straight at Grumpig. However, Grumpig was quick on the draw once again and stopped the flames just before they could hit it with Psychic. Instead of directing them away though, the Hoenn native pushed its hands outward and sent the flames back at Charmander. Having no fear of his own fire, Charmander simply held his ground and allowed the ring of fire to surround him and began drawing in all of the heat around him. The added fuel from the hot flames now making his tail flame glow that much brighter as his eyes practically burned with the fire within. When Ash commanded, "Use that firepower and try another flamethrower." However, Sabrina ordered her Pokémon like she could see the future. Grumpig used Disable. Charmander was right on the cusp of releasing the intensely hot flames now burning within his mouth just as Grumpig's eyes glowed blue and a similar color suddenly suffused Charmander. In that same moment, the flames disappeared from Charmander's mouth and the same look of confusion passed over his face as Pikachu's own had taken when Kadabra used the same move on him earlier on. Before Charmander could really process what had just happened or Ash could give him an order to shake it off, Sabrina commanded stoically, "Use Psywave, Grumpig." As she said that, a very similar multicolored glow from earlier began to emit and glow off of Grumpig's body, but instead of coming from its eyes or hands, the psychic energy seemed to come from all around its body. Especially the gems melded into its skin. Unlike Psychic, Confusion or Psybeam, this attack spread out like a wave of slowly fluctuating, lazily drifting energy that for all intents and purposes looked rather appeasing to the eye. Ash however knew better, and that's why he yelled, "Charmander, try to get away and hide behind one of those pillars." Charmander made an immediate dash for the nearest support pillar to escape the wave of psychic energy now coming towards him, but the little girl on Sabrina's lap giggled and said in a sing-song voice, "It's too late." Sure enough, to everyone else's dismay, the wave of multicolored energy washed over Charmander just before he could duck behind one of the pillar for safety. Falling to his knees, Charmander started writhing and convulsing in pain under the effects of Psywave, which was immobilizing him due to whatever forces that the psychic attack operated under. If that wasn't enough, when Sabrina commanded her Grumpig to use Psybeam again, this time the mark hit straight and true as Charmander was sent flying back into the wall behind him and cratered it slightly before falling to the ground. That was unfortunately all the opportunity that Sabrina needed to have Grumpig use Psychic and begin using the same tactic on Charmander as Kadabra had used on Pikachu in the last match. While the little spunky fire type started getting smashed against one of the nearby pillars under the influence of Psychic with grunts of, "Char! Char! Char!" being heard after every hit, Misty seemed almost enraged on the sidelines beside the others. This is so completely unfair. How are you supposed to beat psychic Pokémon when they can just take command of your own and then start levitating them around and bashing them into anything they want to? It's not fair. This isn't about fair, Misty, Brock admonished sternly while watching the intense battle unfold before their eyes. This is an official Pokémon League gym battle that's meant to test challengers and push them to their limits. To see if they have what it takes to overcome adversity and hardships in the heat of the moment while under pressure. It may not seem very fair when you're facing an opponent that can control your Pokémon like a psychic type can, but that's what makes it worthwhile. If you can find a way to overcome such a thing when it seems most impossible, that's what makes you get a little better each time and is what propels trainers one step closer to being prepared for the Pokémon League with each badge they earn. Soledad chimed in while nodding to Brock's wise words, her own eyes not leaving the battle. Brock is right. This may seem bad right now, but if Ash truly wants to achieve his dream, then he has to be able to overcome challenges like this and clear those hurdles to get one step closer to his goals. The same thing goes for Pokémon coordinating as it does for Pokémon gym battling. You don't give up, and if you stay strong, it makes you better at the end of the day. I just hope Ash can stop this or turn it around like before, because otherwise Charmander's gonna get hurt, Giselle said with a voice full of worry from her place next to Misty. Unfortunately, Sabrina apparently had no intentions of making a repeat of her past mistake and letting Charmander go prematurely like Kadabra did with Pikachu, which ended up resulting in its defeat at the paws of the resilient electric type. This time the merciless psychic user seemed intent on not having Grumpig stop until Charmander was unconscious in its invisible grasp. To make matters even worse, the little girl on her lap spoke directly to Ash again in an infuriatingly taunting tone. Hey, don't you see? You can't win. Your Pikachu defeating Kadabra was just a fluke, nothing else. You can't hope to win because you can't even save your own Charmander. Why not just give up now and become my plaything? We'll have all kinds of fun together. Ash gritted his teeth and struggled not to let the mysterious little girl's taunts get to him, since he knew from the stories he heard that she was just trying to get into his head. Even still though, knowing it and putting the same thing into practice was no easy feat, and he would be lying if he said that her jabs were not starting to get to him. Especially not when he had to see Charmander getting just as violently brutalized as Pikachu was earlier, only that much worse. He could hear his friends calling out to him, trying to offer him encouragement on not letting the little girl get to him, but their voices seemed far away. Even as his fists clenched tightly, Ash started to seriously wonder how he was going to get out of the current, seemingly impossible situation just as he felt something pulling on his pant leg. Looking down, he saw Pikachu staring at him with an expression of intense determination and ferocity in his eyes. Strength and conviction he gave voice to as he began speaking rapidly while gesturing from Ash to Charmander. Pikachu. Pika Pika. Pikachu Pie. Pie Pie Pikachu Pie. Pika 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 Pikachu. Ash's eyes were wide as he heard his first Pokémon give him what he knew was an extremely rousing and very intense pep talk that was full of sincerity and conviction. Even though he couldn't understand Pikachu, the electric type's passionate tone and all the gestures he was making at Charmander spoke loud and clear of exactly what he was trying to say. All of Ash's Pokémon depended on him, and no matter what he thought of himself sometimes, they always had faith in him no matter what. They would fight to the bitter end and to the very peaks of total exhaustion for him because of their intense loyalty, compassion and trust in him. Hearing such fierce vocalizations coming from Pikachu, knowing now what he meant and realizing that his Pokémon was doing it so he didn't lose faith in himself when they had so much in him themselves, caused Ash to feel incredibly touched and uplifted by his Pokémon's trust and loyalty. Feeling a new fire rage in his gut, Ash nodded to his Pokémon and gave a true smile, one filled with intent and purpose. Thanks, Pi, I needed that. You're absolutely right. He then turned around and faced the battle again with his eyes locked into focus. It ain't over, till it's over. As Pikachu pumped his fist, smirked triumphantly and felt another wave of pride for his trainer rush through him, Ash called out to his currently distressed Pokémon, Charmander. Listen to me. This isn't over. I know you're in a lot of pain and I know it all seems helpless right now, but believe me, it isn't. I promise. Now shake off that pain, focus on what you need to do, and let's win this together. What do you say? Hearing such strong, powerful words coming from his trainer, Charmander's eyes snapped open just as he saw himself starting to hurtle over Grumpig's head again. Fortunately, trainer and Pokémon seemed to be perfectly in sync because they both had the same idea at the exact same time. Just as Ash was calling it out, Charmander was already building it up into his mouth so that when his trainer yelled, "Use smokescreen," Charmander struggled against the bonds of the psychic aura holding him back and expelled a thick plume of gas out of his mouth and directly into Grumpig's face just as he passed over its head. Unprepared for this, Grumpig took the full brunt of the black smog directly into its eyes, mouth and nose and caused it to lose all focus. Which was all Charmander needed to break free from the powerful psychic attack and land on all 4 feet on the ground. Mouth still open, Charmander commenced to spreading the thick haze of smoke all over the middle of the ring, which caused it to rise into the air and spread out until it was covering a large portion of the battlefield. Standing outside of the smokescreen and looking towards it as they were able to hear Grumpig struggling inside of the curtain of black smoke, Charmander looked back at Ash and they both seemed to yet again have the same thoughts. Smiling, Ash pointed into the smoke haze and commanded, "Charmander, use fire spin and surround that smokescreen with fire." Opening his mouth once more, Charmander called out his name again and began creating a bright red, circular jet of fire which surrounded the black fog of smoke and extended from ground to ceiling. Seconds later, the smoke cloud disappeared and showed Grumpig standing in the middle of the ring with its arms over its head, which it removed as soon as it saw the smoke cloud was gone. However, before Sabrina could command it to use a psychic-type move and get rid of the flames, Ash yelled, "Charmander, turn up the heat with fire displacement and ember." As he said this, Charmander's tail flame gradually grew smaller and smaller until eventually, it disappeared altogether. Much to the shock and almost terror of Soledad, since she knew what it meant but was stopped by Brock, whom gave her a knowing nod, and effectively halted her from doing anything to even attempt to interfere. Baffled, the redhead watched on and was further stunned to see that instead of Charmander dropping over and dying as she expected when his tail flame disappeared, the flames he was expelling seemed to become that much brighter, stronger and even hotter. Allowing her to feel the intense heat coming off of the inferno quite a distance away even from where she was standing, until the coordinator felt sweat beginning to form on her body. What was even more amazing was how Charmander's entire body appeared to glow a bright red, almost orangish color, while the flames he was making got an even stronger burst of energy and power due to the fire type now adding ember into the mix along with fire spin. Even still, Soledad was confused as to why Ash was having Charmander do this until she looked over and finally saw the answer to her unspoken question. Grumpig, even though it could now see, was becoming practically immobilized by the unbelievably hot temperatures that was circulating within the vortex of flames it was trapped inside of. Sweat was pouring profusely from the psychic type's body and it appeared to be breathing heavily due to all of the oxygen getting sucked out of the air by the wall of ferocious flames surrounding it. Seeing their opponent temporarily handicapped by the inferno prison they had captured it in, Ash took the golden opportunity presented to them and shouted, "Charmander, charge in now." With the roaring flames of both fire spin and ember still spewing from his mouth like the polar opposite of a torrent of water, Charmander ran towards the wall of fire as fast as his legs could take him. As soon as the determined fire type reached his goal, he threw himself into the flames with a cry of defiance just as Ash yelled again, "Fire Fang." Seconds before he could impact with Grumpig inside the cylindrical dome of fire, Charmander's entire mouth ignited in blazing hot fire identical to that spinning around them just as he clamped his sharp jaws down atop the psychic Pokémon's shoulder and dug themselves in deep. Raising its head to the ceiling, Grumpig cried out in fierce pain as what felt like liquid flames were being injected into its skin via the remorseless fire type now biting down deeply into its shoulder with his mouth ablaze. Before Grumpig could even try to shake Charmander off though, Ash shouted through the fire, "Flame burst!" Digging his front and back claws into Grumpig's flesh, Charmander raised himself up until he was level with the larger Pokémon's face. His mouth wide open, Charmander formed a large ball of orange-reddish flames that expanded itself between him and Grumpig as it continued to grow. The psychic Pokémon went wide-eyed and was just about to try and use one of its psychic abilities or straight-up muscle to get free from Charmander and the blazing fire ball growing between them, completely forgetting the dome of flames that had been slowing it down up until now in the face of such certain doom. However, when it tried to move, Grumpig felt agonizing pain pour through its body like thousands of tiny needles were puncturing it. Not realizing that the previous fire fang it had endured from Charmander had actually given it a bad burn which resembled getting paralyzed to some degree from an electric-based attack, Grumpig lost its final chance to get away as Charmander finally released the ball of flames from his mouth. Time seemed to move in slow motion as both Pokémon, silhouetted against the roar of the flames around them, were blasted apart from each other by the massive ball of fire Charmander let loose. An attack which slammed into Grumpig's midsection and smashed it into the ground while Charmander himself was sent flying up into the air above the dome of flames. Seeing the end of the battle at hand, Ash raised his hand and called out, "Charmander, finish this." Dragon Rage. While still airborne, Charmander just managed to hear his trainer over the flames below and flipped around in midair as his stomach took on a bright, deep blue glow which spread throughout his entire body and settled in his mouth. Parting his jaws to reveal a sphere of shining blue draconian energy within, Charmander vaulted off the ceiling as soon as his feet made contact and hurtled towards Grumpig down below, whom was now struggling to stand up again with a large burnt patch of skin on its abdomen from the ball of fire that it took straight on. Unfortunately, just as the flames around it started to die down and it looked up, Grumpig found itself staring at the descending form of Charmander as he closed with it and finally released the energy pent up in its mouth. As soon as the powerful little fire Pokémon released what would hopefully be the last attack of the battle, the cannon of draconic energy morphed into the actual shape of a dragon type just before it collided with the terrified-looking Grumpig below. The entire chamber shook as a loud explosion hailed the success of Charmander's attack, which hit Grumpig and shot smoke back into the air once again and covered the battlefield. Luckily, very luckily, Charmander hadn't been caught up in the blast of his own attack and was instead sent flying out of the cloud of smoke where he hit the ground and rolled several times before finally coming to a stop. Fighting himself to get back on his feet and eventually managing to do so, Charmander turned around and looked towards the center of the ring where the smoke had now cleared and was showing Grumpig laying in a rather sizable crater that put the one Pikachu left behind with his earlier thunder attack to shame. The psychic-type Pokémon's body was battered and bruised from head to toe and the tightly shut eyes gave a definite clue away as to Grumpig's current state of well-being, showing that it was now, indeed, out for the count. Finding himself in a state of disbelief for the second time that day that Sabrina had not only lost one Pokémon in battle but now two, the man in the medical mask who was standing in as the ref raised his hand and gave his verdict. Grumpig is unable to battle, Charmander wins this battle. In a mirror of before Sabrina ordered a simple, return, and Grumpig returned to the Pokeball in the little girl's hands which disappeared soon after. At the same time, Charmander tiredly walked over to his trainer and went to fall down just as Ash caught him in his arms and held him close. Smiling at his Pokemon, Ash nodded and spoke with a sense of great gratitude in his voice. "Charmander, I can't thank you enough for battling as intensely as you did today. I know how hard that was on you and I want you to know that I truly do appreciate it and am very, very proud of you." Charmander smiled himself and nodded to his trainer's words while giving a simple, "Char," in reply, showing his gratitude for Ash's praise. Rubbing Charmander's head one last time, Ash told him to get a good rest and then returned the only fire type he had back to his Pokeball before facing the ring again. His eyes and brain locked firmly onto the match at hand and his focus totally on point even though his stomach was feeling a little nervous since he knew this was the last battle of the match. Which quite naturally meant that it would also most likely be the hardest one yet. As another Pokeball appeared in the little girl's hands, Sabrina psychically opened it and announced dully at the same time, "I choose you." Lunatone. In a flash of bright light, a Pokémon that resembled a half-moon almost perfectly with red eyes on either side of its body and some type of beak-like nose in its center emerged from the Pokeball and floated several feet off the ground. Its eyes just as vacant and emotionless as Sabrina's own. Wow, another Hoenn Pokémon, Giselle said in awe as she got her first glimpse of Sabrina's last Pokémon. And it looks so creepy. I wonder where she got this one and Grumpig from. Misty asked aloud as she looked from Lunatone to Sabrina in curiosity. Brock hummed. It's definitely a mystery. You don't find those Pokémon here in Kanto to my knowledge. For Ash, however, he was thinking of anything but where Sabrina got her Pokémon. Instead, he pulled out his Pokéball of choice. Okay, I'm counting on you to take us home. Throwing the ball up into the air, he announced loudly, Ghastly, come on out. Out of the Pokéball came the very old Ghastly of Maiden's Peak with a grand twirl in midair as confetti exploded into existence around him. Oh, how wonderful it is to be free again. Thank you everyone, I'll be here all day. Bowing several times to no one in particular, Ghastly then turned to look back at Ash and grinned. You rang, oh great and powerful trainer of mine. Ash nodded seriously and pointed at Lunatone. We're in the middle of a gym battle, Ghastly, and this is against a psychic-type Pokémon. I need you to be on the top of your game, all right. Ghastly looked around and then at his opponent, smile never fading away. A psychic-type EH. Well, I suppose that makes us half-cousins. His echoing, almost operatic laughter rang throughout the gym afterwards as he stated cheerfully. Do not fret yourself, Ash, I won't be as careless this time as I was the last time we battled together. A serious expression also formed on Ghastly's face then, which was rather odd in appearance all things considered, since his seemingly permanent smile was still etched onto his mouth. The only difference being his eyes, which were set into a determined stare right at Lunatone. For Soledad and the referee, however, who had not been granted the luxury of being introduced to Ghastly beforehand, their eyes went wide and mouths agape as they stared at the ghost type in shock. It talks. Soledad exclaimed with her face set into a humorous expression of complete disbelief. Impossible, was the accented, totally stunned voice of the mask-wearing gym hand who stood at the top of the ring between Sabrina and Ash. It simply isn't possible. Sabrina didn't say anything, but the little girl in her lap did, foregoing her usual giggle to be replaced with a tone of childish curiosity. A talking Ghastly. So you do have a ghost Pokémon after all. That will make it so much more fun when you lose and you both become our new friends. Playing with a talking Ghastly will be so much more fun than a plain old regular one. Ash could tell Ghastly was curious as to the little girl herself, but he simply spoke in a stern voice to capture the eccentric ghost Pokémon's attention. Don't worry about her, Ghastly, she's been doing that this whole match. She'll try to get inside your head and throw you off your game, so just ignore her and focus on the task at hand. Don't get cocky, don't get sloppy, and watch out for her Pokémon. They're really strong and she knows how to use them. Ghastly nodded and replied just as simply, understood, while getting into a ready position up in the air. His entire being determined not to mess up and get complacent and then nearly lose the battle like he did back in Shadow's Hallow when he took on Waltz Misdreavus. Apparently though, Sabrina had learned her lesson when it came to giving Ash and his Pokémon any amount of time to make a move, because she quickly commanded her Lunatone, use Psybeam now. The moon-shaped Pokémon's eyes glowed before it fired the same beams of psychic energy that Grumpig had earlier right at Ghastly. Acting quick on his feet, Ash ordered. Ghastly dodged to the side and then used Shadow Ball. The ghost type swerved to the right just before the beams of energy could hit him and at the same time, shot a fast-moving ball of darkness at Lunatone. Fortunately for it though, the psychic type managed to dodge out of the way quick enough to avoid it and then countered immediately on Sabrina's command of, now use Rock Slide. Dozens of large rocks appeared above and all around Ghastly's head seconds later, which forced him to take evasive action. Dodging, swerving, flying and ducking out of the way of the falling rocks as they fell and attempted to crush him under their weight. Sure, he could have phased through them, but that took just a split's moment of concentration and currently, he didn't have that luxury. Still, even as Ghastly dodged out of the way of the falling rocks, he couldn't help but make a joke. I've heard of acid rain but never rock rain. We must be off to a rocky start, In the midst of Ghastly's bad puns, Sabrina ordered her Pokémon to use Psychic on the many rocks that were now laying around on the battlefield below. As Lunatone's body glowed blue and it initiated the Psychic-type species' most powerful attack, the many large rocks that had failed to hit Ghastly rose back up into the air and then started getting flung in all different directions in an attempt to hit Ghastly again. Ash didn't want to leave Ghastly's speed and current luck in dodging all of the rocks up to chance though, and that's why he yelled, "Ghastly, spin and use Nightshade." Stopping in place with a wide grin on his face again, Ghastly began spinning himself in a circle in midair like a top while twin beams of dark energy exploded from his mischievous eyes. The spinning motion combined with Nightshade effectively created a rapidly firing cannon which shot off multiple blasts of the ghostly energy, ultimately serving the purpose of destroying all of the rocks that Lunatone was controlling psychically in an attempt to hit him. "Oh oh oh oh." Ghastly cheered as he spun. "Now this is living. Not sitting around rotting on some boring old peak. Yeehaw mama." One of the shots of Nightshade even managed to hit Lunatone, whom wasn't nearly as fast with evasion as Ghastly, and sent the Pokémon floating backwards several feet with a grunt of pain due to the super effectiveness of the ghost-type attack. Sabrina didn't wait to give her Pokémon a chance to recover, however, because right at the same time as Ghastly stopped spinning with his eyes comically rolling around in his head as he continued giggling to himself, the cold and stoic gym leader ordered in an icy voice, "Lunatone, use Moonblast." Moving back a few feet more as its body began to glow white, Lunatone formed a ball of pinkish energy in its center near what resembled its nose, while streaks of white light formed off of the ball itself. "No way, that's a fairy-type attack," Brock shouted as he stepped forward and looked up at the psychic Pokémon who was about to use the attack. "You definitely don't see one of those every day," Soledad remarked distractedly while she looked on in obvious concern for what might happen if Ghastly got hit by that attack. Just as Lunatone fired off the dazzling and admittedly beautiful ball of energy, Ash called out urgently, "Ghastly, you need to get out of the way now." Regaining control of himself and his senses, Ghastly saw the sparkling ball of energy coming at him in just the nick of time and barely managed to swerve to the side and avoid it. However, Sabrina was cunning as she commanded again, "Confusion Lunatone." As its eyes and body glowed blue and it focused its influence outward, Ash immediately grew concerned that Lunatone was trying to control Ghastly. However, when the ball of fairy-type energy stopped mere inches from hitting the back wall and then reversed course, shooting back towards Ghastly again, he saw the real purpose behind the tactic. "Ghastly, watch out behind you," he shouted up to his Pokémon, whom heard him and spun around to face the ball of incoming energy with a serious expression now upon his face. Surprisingly though, just before the attack could attempt to hit him again, Sabrina ordered her Pokémon to use Stone Edge, which Lunatone was quick to oblige with as several large, jagged pieces of rock formed in front of its body and then shot off towards Ghastly like little rockets. Sensing both incoming threats and knowing that now was anything but the time for joking around, Ghastly waited until just the right moment and then shot straight up into the air, his action allowing Moonblast and Stone Edge to connect with each other and explode into a rain of dozens of rock pieces and brightly shining light. As the smoke cloud settled over the field temporarily, Ghastly ducked down into it and then spoke up from within the haze in an exaggeratedly creepy and spooky voice. "Don't worry everyone, I know the perfect way in which to take down this psychic and her floating rock. Muhahahaha." As his boisterous laughter echoed throughout the gym, everything gradually went silent until, in a burst of white smoke that overclouded the dust that was still settling from Lunatone's previous attacks, a gigantic shape slowly emerged and rose up high into the air. When the smoke around it cleared enough for everyone to see exactly what it was, several reactions made themselves known all at once. Ash's was simply an expression of exasperated frustration with his right hand over his face. Brock and Giselle had looks of total confusion upon theirs. Sabrina appeared as emotionless as ever. Both Soledad and the referee sweat dropped in question of Ghastly's sanity, and Misty lunged back in terror, the redhead's skin instantly beginning to crawl and break out into nervous bumps at the disturbing sight before her. The source of all of the varied and somewhat humorous reactions was due to Ghastly shapeshifting his form entirely until he now resembled a massive Weedle. The long-bodied, horn-headed, fake bug type slowly wiggling its body from side to side directly in front of Lunatone, whom appeared as emotionless and impassive as ever even in the face of such a perplexing sight. Removing his hand from his face, Ash shouted up to his Pokémon, "Ghastly, what are you doing?" The voice of said ghost type could be heard coming from the giant bug as he replied, "Simple. I've always heard that psychic-type Pokémon are afraid of and weak against bug types, so I decided to take the shape of one and scare this little moon rock into a corner that it won't be able to fight its way out of." Ash's mouth all but hung open and his face appeared to be one of complete and total disbelief before he finally came back to his full senses a short while later and then tore at his hair while yelling loudly, "Are you crazy?" Exclamation mark. Ghastly's "That's just a myth that crackpot wannabe Pokémon researchers made up as a way to give them something to announce at Pokémon Science Expos. It's not true. Why the hell would psychic types be afraid of bug types when their attacks have been proven to barely even be able to touch them by actual Pokémon researchers? Unfortunately, before Ghastly could have a chance to calculate his grievous mistake, Sabrina grew impatient. Enough of this foolishness. Lunatone, use hypnosis. Before Ghastly could cancel his illusion and have even a hope of dodging the potentially game-ending attack, Lunatone was already sending several large, pulsating rings of purple energy at the fake bug type which surrounded it and slowly distorted the air around the sizable illusion. Gradually, the image of Weedle faded away and as it did, to Ash and everyone else's dread, Ghastly was shown to be fast asleep while simply levitating slowly in midair and snoring with his mouth open. Not one to show her opponent any mercy, Sabrina first commanded for her Pokémon to use another new move called Future Sight followed by Stone Edge. The first attack only being signaled by a faint blue glowing of Lunatone's eyes while the second one was much more noticeable as dozens of jagged rocks appeared in front of it again and then fired off at Ghastly. Ash called out to his snoozing Pokémon but Ghastly was too far gone into the land of dreams to hear him. Thus, when the multiple sharp rocks started raining down upon him and pelting the ghost type repeatedly with their hard, unforgivingly rough surfaces, Ghastly could do nothing but cringe and grunt in pain in his sleep. Far from done, Sabrina then gave another command, now use another Moonblast. Ash knew that if that particular attack connected, Ghastly would be in trouble and that's why he started shouting as loud as he could. "Ghastly, wake up. Come on. If you don't wake up then things are gonna get really ugly real fast." The infuriating giggling from the little girl sounded again as Lunatone charged up and prepared to release the fairy-type attack. Too late. Talking Ghastly is about to go nighty-night permanently. Sure enough, when Lunatone finally fired off the brightly shining ball of energy, Ghastly still had not awoken and was powerless to stop it. Even when the almost hypnotizing ball of light made contact with the sleeping ghost type and rocked the arena in another explosion, nothing could be done to stop the insurmountable damage that Ghastly had most likely just taken. In fact, when the smoke cleared and revealed Ghastly to still be levitating in place though badly damaged, everyone was surprised that he wasn't on the ground unconscious or at the very least far too injured to continue battling if he did indeed wake up. As usual though there was no rest or luck for the weary because at the same time that Ghastly was revealed to still be conscious, the ceiling above glinted as out of it suddenly appeared a growing sphere of large psychic energy which grew bigger and bigger the longer it stayed suspended up in the air. Ash and everyone else knew exactly what they were looking at and he gave voice to it in an attempt to awaken Ghastly again. "You need to wake up now, Ghastly. That attack is Future Sight and if you don't open your eyes right here and now then this battle is over." As the buildup of psychic energy up near the ceiling grew stronger and stronger, Ghastly's face began to twitch and grimace as his inner conscious fought to get free and awaken himself. All the while though, the child on Sabrina's lap continued to taunt and tease. "You won't wake it fast enough. You won't wake it fast enough." Ash gritted his teeth for the umpteenth time and shouted one more time just as Future Sight prepared to fully unleash itself, "Ghastly, wake up right now or you're gonna lose." Maybe luck or the sound of his trainer's voice finally snapped him out of the deep trance he was in because just before he completely ran out of time, Ghastly's eyes snapped open. Awakening just as the force of psychic energy above finally released itself and shot like a cannon down at the ghost type. Spinning around, Ghastly's eyes widened when he saw the blast of powerful psychic energy coming for him and at the same time, he heard Ash yell loudly, "Use confusion." Almost as though his body was reacting on instinct and muscle memory instead of on cognitive command, Ghastly's eyes and body glowed a bright blue. As soon as he did, the unnaturally powerful confusion attack took hold and enveloped the incoming beam of psychic energy in its powerful control. Sensing he had only seconds, Ghastly grunted with effort and moved to the side while using as much as force as he could to shift the direction of Future Sight. His entire body straining with the force he was exerting in the process. It was a tense moment that went right down to the wire indeed because with barely even seconds to spare while everyone below held their breath, Ghastly just barely managed to avoid the focused beam of psychic energy by a hair's breadth. Now shifted out of the way of Future Sight's path, Ghastly continued to use all the power he could manage to redirect the attack in the best possible direction he could think of it to go, which was on a collision course with its creator. Lunatone, being far too slow to move out of the way of the speeding burst of pure psychic power which was only enhanced by Ghastly's confusion, could only hover there in midair with its eyes widening ever so slightly in the first show of emotion that it had displayed the entire battle. Seeing what Ghastly had done, Giselle, Brock and Misty cheered. Soledad looked shocked that Ghastly had used a psychic-type move. The temperamental referee shouted, "What?" And the little girl in Sabrina's lap whined in a loud, almost shrieking voice, "No fair." Ash raised his hand and pointed at Lunatone while calling back, "Sorry little girl, I'm not gonna be your plaything today." Ghastly used Shadow Ball. Mustering up the last of his energy in his tired and battered state, Ghastly said nothing and instead let his actions do the talking for him. His entire body glowing with a dark aura as he grunted and released a huge shadow ball at the descending beam of psychic energy. As the ball of ghostly power met with that of the psychic beam, both attacks slowly merged and melded together in what would appear to be an unholy union of dark and light just before colliding with Lunatone at full speed. The resulting final explosion rocked the entire gym like a mini landslide and obscured just Lunatone, not the entire ring this time, in a thick cloud of smoke that expanded towards the ceiling above. Seconds later, however, Lunatone became visible again as it fell from the smoke cloud it was in and dropped to the ring below like dead weight. Its smooth, rock-covered surface smoking like a burnt sausage as it finally hit the ground with a thud and lay still. The vacancy of any kind of conscious thought in its eyes giving proof to the unspoken question of what condition it was now in. Seeing this but being unable to fully compute or understand exactly what he was now witnessing, the man standing in his referee and who practically seemed to worship the ground Sabrina walked on found himself to be at a temporary loss for words. Never before had he seen a match with his powerful gym leader drag on to such dramatic limits, let alone actually make it to this point. Sabrina herself hadn't even lost her Abra in countless battles against the many challengers that came her way, and now, in the course of a single match against some strange trainer from a no-name place like Pallet Town, someone had actually managed to defeat her in an all-out, 3-on-3, fair and square Pokémon battle. Finally returning to his senses a short time later, he did his duty and raised his hand. Gesturing towards Ash as he announced loud enough for everyone to hear, "Lunatone is unable to battle. Since the gym leader has lost all 3 of her Pokémon, I hereby declare the winner of this match to be Ash Ketchum of Pallet Town and his Ghastly." As his friends all began cheering in praise for him, Ash dropped to his butt on the ground and breathed out a heavy sigh. Thank Arceus, it's finally over. Looking up, he saw Ghastly slowly floating down to him and he smiled wearily at his Pokémon while nodding. "Hecuva battle Ghastly, Hecuva battle. You really showed grit and determination out there and I really appreciate it. You did great." Ash glanced down at Pikachu and rubbed his battered Pokémon behind the ears. "You all did. That was the toughest battle we've fought yet, but each of you gave it your all and came out on top. I'm super proud of you." Pikachu smiled and rubbed his head into Ash's hand while Ghastly smiled tiredly. "You put your faith in us and we didn't want to let you down. I don't believe it gets any plainer than that." Before Ash could reply or any of his friends could come up to congratulate them, they all heard the little girl in Sabrina's lap speak in barely above a whisper at the same time as Lunatone was returned to its Pokeball, which disappeared immediately thereafter. "No. We don't lose, we don't." Her voice became slightly more audible the more she spoke. "They promised to play with us, they promised." Suddenly, the little girl's head shot up and her eyes glowed a bright, blazing yellow that was mimicked in color by Sabrina's own. Somehow, the young girl's voice also became much deeper and seemed to echo throughout the gym with an undertone of malice laced within her words. "They promised to play and be our friends and play with you as they will." Sabrina's hair stood up on end and appeared to levitate behind her as the 2 standing torch lanterns on top of the platform that she was on flickered and barely resisted being put out completely. "Rather they want to or not." As she said those words, the little girl extended her hands as the glowing in her and Sabrina's eyes became brighter. Almost painfully so. "They will be our friends forever." Hearing the little girl's voice end in what resembled a roar, Ash shot to his feet and stepped back with his eyes wide. "What the heck do you think you're doing, Sabrina? The battle's over." Over near the top of the ring, he heard the man that had judged the match cry out in fear while stepping back several paces. "No, no, please. Do not hurt me, great Sabrina. Haven't I been nothing but loyal to you? Please." In unison, both Sabrina and the little girl turned their heads towards him with their faces showing nothing but cold indifference and malice, and as soon as they did, a blue glow surrounded his body as he was lifted off of his feet and pulled high into the air. Gasping and grunting while his body twitched in a desperate attempt to move it, the mask-covered man gurgled and just barely managed to rasp out, Please Sabrina, do not do this. Please anything else he had to say was cut off as the man in the white coat was flung back across the gym with a strangled scream escaping his lips. Hitting the back wall with a loud thud, the wannabe psychic slid down heavily and landed on the ground before falling to his side and becoming motionless. An action that, altogether, caused Ash and his friends to feel immediate fear at the sudden dangerous turn of events that the entire situation had just taken. "Did you see that?" Misty gasped in shock. "She just picked that guy up with her mind and tossed him like a piece of trash. We need to get out of here now." Brock yelled without any further waiting around as he and the others turned and began running towards the exit of the battlefield, while followed swiftly by Ash, Pikachu and Ghastly, who caught up and fell into step behind them in mere seconds. However, just as they passed the last pillar on the way to the door, both torches on either side of Sabrina's chair atop the second-level platform took on a dark blue glow and then blazed to life like an inferno had suddenly been lit inside of their basins. Fire shooting straight up into the air like pillars of skin-melting lava, the seemingly alive flames roared forward in an arcing fashion and merged together before hitting the ground in front of Ash and his friends. Spreading outward into a long line that reached from one wall to the other, the flames raged high into the air and formed an impassable barrier that the seven of them were unable to get through. Coming to a halt in front of the wall of flames, Ash looked back at the enraged psychic duo and then up at Ghastly before pointing to the fire and commanding, "Ghastly, use confusion and part these flames." Not wasting a second, Ghastly utilized his own psychic power and opened up a wide enough gap in the flames that his trainer and the others were able to jump through and get to the other side safely. Simply flying over top of the flames afterwards, Ghastly joined them as they all made a mad dash for the exit. However, just as they reached it, the doors suddenly slammed shut tightly and not even Ghastly's confusion was able to open them back up again. Turning around, they all looked back at the wall of flames just as the fire dimmed and began to flicker before fading away completely. As soon as it did though, Sabrina and the little girl in her lap could be seen still sitting in the throne-like chair atop the raised platform with their eyes glowing menacingly yellow without falter. Taking a single step forward, Ash shouted at them both, "Just stop this already, you two. I only agreed to be your plaything or whatever if you won, but you lost instead, so just forget about it and let us go. What are you gonna do, keep us here against our will and kidnap us?" All he got as a reply was both Sabrina and the little girl speaking at the same time, "You promised to be our friend and play with us and you will do as you said. We cannot lose." Then, to the further horror of Ash and his friends, Sabrina and the little girl formed a massive amount of psychic energy in front of them which glowed and blazed a bright blue color like indigo flames. Extending her hands forward, the little girl started giggling manically as the mass of psychic energy began shooting across the gym towards Ash and the others like a comet streaking through the sky. Due to the immense speed it was traveling at, Ash, Pikachu, Ghastly and his friends only had enough time to cry out in terror and attempt to shield themselves before the overwhelming amount of psychic energy fell upon them all and instantly turned their worlds seemingly upside down. All seven of them felt their heads become incredibly heavy and disoriented as the room around them appeared to spin in circles and fade in and out of clarity. Their legs felt as though they had become jelly, and the scariest feeling of all was how their entire bodies started feeling like they were melting and falling away. Looking over, Ash tried to get a clear view of Giselle, Soledad and then Pikachu and Ghastly, but to his utter horror, he saw each of them actually starting to fade away like their bodies were made of mist. A process that was beginning at their feet and spreading upwards quickly. He could hear their screams and shouts of fear, and as much as he wanted to do something, he found himself completely helpless to do so. What was more, when he looked at himself, he saw the same thing was happening to him. As the phenomena continued to consume his body all the way up to his chest, Ash held his hands in front of his face and watched as they too started to fade away until he was only able to just barely see the glowing yellow eyes of Sabrina and the child in her lap at the far end of the room, which appeared as though it were now 100 miles away. Looking down as what was left of his body vanished, Ash only managed to see Pikachu, Ghastly and his friends disappear entirely before he too faded away into nothingness. His whole being and very consciousness itself seemingly slipping away into a great void of total obscurity as heavy blackness became all that he could possibly perceive in the waking world or even the one of his dreams. In all truth, Ash didn't expect for himself to wake up. Or, at the very least, if he did, he expected to see a bright light and maybe even Arceus herself as a way to let him know that he had indeed passed on and was now awaiting his final judgment before stepping into the afterlife forever. However, when his eyes blinked open and he instead saw blue skies above him surrounded by tall buildings, he slowly sat up and then took stock of his surroundings. Seeing something once he did that completely stunned him. To Ash's total confusion and bewilderment, he found himself sitting in the middle of a street in what he knew from his waking memories to be none other than Saffron City itself. Down to the very last skyscraper, everything resembled the city to a T, which left no further question in his mind that, somehow, he had ended up back in the city indeed. The only issue he found with his new surroundings besides the multiple questions he now had was two things. For one, he was totally alone with not a sign of his friends or even Pikachu and Ghastly anywhere to be found, and the second, he seemed to be the only living soul in the entire area. Which of course he immediately found to be beyond unusual since the words, empty, and saffron, simply didn't go together at all. Standing up, Ash looked around and glanced as far into the distance on both sides of the street as he could and still saw absolutely no one except for himself. Furthermore, when he walked over to the right-hand sidewalk and peered in through the thick plexiglass of one of the many businesses that stretched all along underneath the massive buildings throughout the city, he failed to see anyone else inside of what he was assuming to be a coffee shop. Stepping back and rubbing the back of his head, Ash murmured to himself, "Okay, something is seriously not right here." He then looked around once more. Where the heck is everybody? Heading back out into the street, the black-haired trainer began walking down the road while continuing to swivel his head this way and that in an attempt to catch a glimpse of at least someone. "Brock," he shouted with his hands over his mouth. "Misty, Pikachu." Turning around, Ash started walking backwards while continuing to shout. "Ghastly, Giselle, Soledad. Hey guys, where are you?" Getting no reply of any kind but the sound of utter silence in the eerily desolate streets, Ash continued on his way through the city. Checking in every alley, every street corner and through the glass of every building for his missing friends and Pokémon. However, upon hearing a loud, "Pika!" Ash stopped in his tracks and started frantically looking in every direction for the source of what he knew.